Trigger warning, this episode discusses sexual and physical abuse of people with disabilities, and listener discretion is advised. In this episode of Have the Nerve, I speak to Jake Briggs.
G'day, my name's Jake Briggs. I'm a proud Wanneroo Kamilaroi man, and I'm the Managing Director for CultureConnex, a disability service provision company that works in and around the NDIS and other state and territory disability sectors, which is mainly in service provision, but we also jump into advocacy and consulting also.
And host of the podcast Keep Rolling with Jake Briggs. We talk about his career as an advocate, his work in service provision, his work supporting First Nations people during the Royal Commission into Violence, Abuse, Neglect and Exploitation of People with Disability, the recent Voice Referendum, and the ripple effect that misinformation and lack of education has had for people with disabilities living in not just metropolitan, but regional, rural and remote communities across Australia. So you've done so much in your career. I think I've known you for like 7 years now, and the first time I met you, you were working First Persons Disability Network. Do you want to talk a little bit about your career journey, I guess, and how you've gone from like the city to, I'm at the Central Coast right now, and you're doing CultureConnex, and just your work. Do you want to give us a bit of background?
Yeah, so it's been a bit of a wild journey, a bit of a roller coaster ride. So post spinal cord injury, so I've been in a chair nearly pushing 14 years now, and it's not like I've just known disability from having that injury. Like my youngest brother's on the spectrum, so it's been having awareness of disability since I've been a young fella. So, but yeah, anyway, I had the spinal cord injury and I was in the building and construction industry, building and carpentry, because I'm a qualified carpenter and do building, and that's with what I do today also when it's got to do with home mods and new builds with specialist disability accommodation underneath the NDIS. So I couldn't swing a hammer anymore, so I jumped back into the construction industry with the same company, Multiplex, and they took a punt on me getting back in the industry, which was daunting for them and daunting for myself, but found the niche of getting into construction financial risk management, so I took that on. And that was a steep learning curve, so a lot of it related from what I used to do physically, but when it's a position that you usually have to have a tertiary requirement for, but they had confidence in me, so I jumped in and gave that a crack and done that for a fair few years, and that was great. Just knowing what I could do with my limitations, being a C5, C6 incomplete quadriplegic, and just, finding my way in that style of work, but also using the technology to take advantage. And where I did, and that was travelling from the Central Coast to Sydney in the CBD for a long time in various different locations in the city, because, Multiplex does a lot of construction jobs in and around the city, mostly like they're a tier 1 construction company, so it's pretty much anything above 50 mil, so it's all big stuff. So great to work on, love the experience, love the camaraderie with working with those females and males, and just me, and then sort of seeing what I could do and vice versa. But then got into and always doing advocacy in the background, and particularly First Nations, and where that got into where I ended up leaving Multiplex and got in with FPDN, First Nations, First Peoples, FPDN, First Peoples Disability Network Australia. And I'd been working with those guys beforehand, even when I was with Multiplex, but I was on the board. So, and then I was chairman for FPDN and doing all sorts of other stuff in the background. So that was full-time work and doing work for them, and also because me being Wanneroo Kamilaroi, and I'm also a director on the Wanneroo Nation Aboriginal Corporation up in the Hunter Valley. Still doing that, been doing that since 2016. But anyway, so yeah, FPDN, so I left Multiplex in 2016, then jumped on with FPDN, still in the city, which was great working with these guys full time and travelling the nation, seeing how the different mobs with disability and how they interacted within their own communities with disability, but also culturally. So I saw a lot. I went to all different states and territories, from urban, rural and remote, and where some mobs, English is their fourth, fifth language. And there's so many stories that should be told. There was one fella that I ran into where he come in from the desert I met him in Alice Springs. So he come in from the desert in 1984, didn't even know of what existence.
And so then when the realisation happened?
Yeah, so he ended up staying in town, and then the rest of his family was like, no, we don't want to be a part of this, and went back out community, and he's been living in and around Alice Springs and where he's a full-time painter. Shout out to Paul Colcott, because he took us out to, it was a bit of a wild place. It was this massive warehouse where this guy, this Aussie fella, that was a furrer, so he ran fur trades in Canada. Okay. And then ended up coming back to Australia in the late 70s and ended up stopping in Alice Springs and built this massive facility, and all air-cooled because of where he stores all these paintings, and where he gets all mob and they come in and they all paint, and then he pays them a commission off the painting, and he's selling stuff like Kerry Stokes and high-profile people are buying mob's paintings. And I was sort of and ah about this, right, because
I was actually going to ask you, that was going to be the next question.
And I'm like, man, you're sort of taking advantage of this situation, but in the same time you're putting money in the mob's pocket, and it's not just a couple of cents. He's paying them serious wages because he's making serious money. So that did make me feel better, but then I struggle with it at the same time too. So, but at the end of the day, it's mob that are level-headed and do know what they want to do, and they are spreading their message.
It's all as an artist anyway, it's already hard to try and sell your art. Sometimes you feel like you need to, I guess I'm just talking about myself really, but sometimes you feel like you need to assimilate your art to somebody's certain things that they like at the time, and so to then go from just to being an artist, being this is representative of me, I'm not going to change it. It's so, I can completely understand. I actually completely understand why you would have a battle between what you need.
It is, a bit of a battle, bit of a, to and fro, but at the end of the day, if it's not, it's sort of hard to say if they're taking advantage or not, but he's making a lot of money, but so is the mob too, so there are sort of win-wins, but then it is sort of that taking advantage too, but it's a bit...
You do what you can.
That's it, you got to survive too, and if it's mob being able to tell their stories, and if it's, where you got disability coming into the mix as well, and it's showcasing that, but through art, it's huge, and, I love that stuff too, so when it's got to do with me being a brown Aboriginal man, First Nations, being involved in art my whole life, and now seeing disability emerge through that, so, which is great. And also, what I've seen throughout the country, and different people, different mob with disability, and whether that's Aboriginal and different cold groups, Anglo-Australians, so just, and different, seeing all the different viewpoints and taking that in and being able to structure that through advocacy, which I was doing through FPDN, and, I've got opportunities to go overseas and, United Nations, and see it on that front, and how we're perceived by the rest of the world, and being able to tell our story. And, I'm very thankful for being able to work with FPDN, and also, seeing stuff that's pretty horrific too, because I work with a lot of youngsters going through when they're institutionalised and going through correctional facilities and seeing how they're treated, and you've seen, like, when you got Mr. Voller there up in the NT, like how he was treated, and you're seeing, with the spit bag hood on his head and how full on that was. And I'm like, and a lot of people didn't know. I'm like, yeah, that was up in the NT, but this is happening in New South Wales. We've got same facilities like that in New South Wales.
So we've just dived right straight in, Jake, and there's a few things that I just wanted to I'm just thinking about that I'm going to ask you questions about, and this obviously being one of them, but something you said earlier about English would be like their fourth, fifth language. A lot of people don't even really know that at all, and then it kind of flagged with me how entirely ignorant we are about even surface level, like the story of that man who didn't even know that, and freaked out and went back. Completely understandable. I'm even thinking about how I'm coming at it from a metropolitan perspective. Like you're talking about rural and remote regional communities. People know anything about it.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what really gives me the shit. So, and ignorance is bliss, right? We see a lot of this, whether it's got to do with the cultural components or disability or both, intersectionality. And I get frustrated with it a lot, because people just, and you see the ignorance in metro, but like how people live and the situations that are in these rural, remote environments, and and just where even people within those environments don't get disability because of just the multi different facets of life, and how people are trying to deal with just living in a society as maybe an Aboriginal person, or even if they are a different cult group, and then you got that layer of disability, and then just where you just bring that up again, where you got this story where, and I'm like, this should be told, of this person not knowing of white existence. And I'm like, that's why I get frustrated coming back to when you've got the referendum, and it's just the magnitude, the amount of people that just don't know First Nations culture, Aboriginality, because you've gone through, I don't know if you grew up in New South Wales and went through the school system here, but just what you don't learn coming through school, but what you should know coming through school.
We're just going to dive straight into advocacy work, and so
Into it, rip the scab off it.
Yeah, rip the scab off. There was an article I read on the Disability Royal Commission. It was almost like a top 10 of the most horrific stories coming out of the Disability Royal Commission. And one of them was a story about a family in remote Australia who had been dumpster diving to try and put together a wheelchair for one of their family members, because the wheelchairs that we have in metro areas are not made for rural and regional and remote communities. And again, that's just something that I was like, of course not. This wheelchair that I'm in now wouldn't fly on a dirt road. It's more than people think it is, or if they were thinking about it at all. Do you want to talk to me about your role in some of the advocacy work that you were doing at FPDN? Sorry, here we are, and into the Disability Royal Commission?
Yeah, and that's, I've been saying frustrating a lot, but there's a lot to be frustrated about. So. And it's sad too, because you do see a lot of people that don't get the right equipment out in these areas, because you go to certain parts of Australia, because it's a massive continent, and you go to some areas and it almost seems like a different country, because when it's got to do with the landscape itself, the environment, when you're traversing the land, whether you're walking on it or wheeling on it. And I've been in whether it's got to do with these massive meetings, symposiums, and this is going back in 2011. I remember when I wasn't even with FPDN. It was when it was like ADN, when they were just a New South Wales body, but went to Adelaide. And 2011, they were talking about this back then, how inadequate wheelchairs were in and around those rural, remote areas, and because they'd only last a few weeks because they're just fully not equipped, or the knowledge isn't there from like the assistive tech personnel to give them the right gear. Things sort of caught up to speed now, but it's still not up to scratch because you've brought it up, and I'm like, man, this is happening. Like, so if we're going back 2011, this is over a decade or more. Like, you've got the NDIA where they've got a lot of information, so it's, and you have some of these support coordinators or other people where they don't know enough, and it's not their fault, but they don't know, or the AT people, but it's having more influence from the top down of, you know, what should be adequate for those areas and what can sustain living in an environment. Otherwise you've got that person that just has, they're just living in their house because they can't go out because you've just got techs or people that just can't, either they don't know what to script up for these people, or they just and just get them out the wrong gear and it doesn't last that long.
Or it might not even already be made yet, you know?
Yeah,
is
and
that a thing?
That's the thing, and it, you know, because it takes long enough in an urban environment. Like once you get a chair scripted up, and you're looking at an 8 to 16 weight week because you don't know if the stock's here overseas. And, you know, we're all waiting a long time, and these things are specified to you personally, but there needs just to be a lot more education in and around accessibility in those rural and remote, because it's heavily focused on, you know, in urban settings, because there's certain apps that you can go into and they show everything where it is in the city CBD, but you start going into Central Coast or the Hunter and start scaling outwards, and then that's when it becomes a bit trickier, and then that's when you need more advocacy, or off the back of the Royal Commission, like you got the 222 recommendations. So like we're finding what's within those recommendations, like all you advocacy people out there, organisations, like really hone in on the recommendations, look in what fits in with in your niche, and whether that is access, and looking at where we're lacking in rural and remote. Okay, well, let's look at the access, but what about the cultural access? What about language? You know, that coming into the fold. So, you know, and I look at it from a perspective of, because I've done a lot of advocacy, but now I do service provision, and where I think iron sharpens iron. So, you know, being a solid advocate makes me a better service provider. You know, what we're doing here with CultureConnex, but like that, you need advocacy, but it needs to have teeth in it too. And then that's where I'm hoping, off the back of this Royal Commission, it does have teeth, because I don't want it to follow suit with some Royal Commissions where they do have recommendations and it's, you know, there's nothing happening, and it's like there's all this resource that went into, like when it's got the commissioners, it's got to travel in the country, gathering all that data, all that research, and then it goes nowhere. But I think the commissioners, like I got involved, you know, with Commissioner Mason, because I was a part of a First Nation advisory group to the Royal Commission, and talking about all our thoughts and feelings personally, but just what we hear on the ground too, and where we can collectively bring that up to the Commission and add weight on that situation. And I'm proud that I was fortunate enough to be a part of that group, because I was probably one of, I think it was one of 12 or 15 people that were a part of that group and talking to Commissioner Mason, and some of the other commissioners, and that was a bit of a wild one too, because that's when COVID hit, and it's like, okay, how do we make this work? And we did make it work, and it was thankful for, you know, a lot of the digital tech out there, and which, you know, I was using a lot of that anyway, because I love tech and taking advantage of it for myself and my disability, but also showcasing it for other people with disability. But made it work, and there was a lot of horrific stories that were coming through, whether that was First Nations or just other people with disability. And like, we need change with advocacy, with service provision, with the state and federal government. So they need to all jump on this and add weight on this situation, because there's so many vulnerable people out there that keep bloody getting taken advantage of.
It kind of seems a little bit like it's all talk, no action. And we were talking about other royal commissions before that. All talk, no action, recommendations, XYZ. So were you in the advisory group for the whole duration of the Royal Commission? Maybe we should jump back a little bit, because there are people living in the United States and the UK who also listen to this podcast as well, and they may not know anything about the Disability Royal Commission that had been going on for like 4 years. Do you just want to give a bit of an explanation and talk a little bit about it?
So with the Royal Commission, folks, so it come about because we're looking at the landscape of disability, the sector, where we've got the National Disability Insurance Scheme, and I've talked to people that are from the US and UK, and like, we're very lucky that we've got a system like this in place.
I know I often think about how the US is the second biggest listenership of this podcast, and I'm harboring on about the NDIS, and I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, and there's, you know, positives and negatives to the NDIS, but overall it's a good thing for our mob, our people with disability across the board in Australia. And so, you know, the scheme's been going for, you're looking at a decade now. So, and you guys have probably gone over this in previous podcasts, what the National Disability Insurance Scheme is. But so that's a Commonwealth funded scheme, so federal, across the whole country, but where each state and territory were originally looking after their respective participants in each state and territory, like people with disability, and funding different schemes for them, and they were all different schemes and worked at different capacities, and they weren't all the same. But then that got folded into the national scheme, the NDIS, and like, I'll say that again, which I think is a better prospect for individuals with disability, but it's also opened up a can of worms, and then that's where you got your registered providers, your plan managed, your non-registered providers, and people that are self-managed. And you've got a lot of bonuses to all three and a lot of negatives, but you've seen off the back of that, and you know, you've had a lot of crap going on with people with disability and individuals getting taken advantage of from the NDIS. But while the scheme has kicked off, the nation has like really been involved in it, I think, compared to when it was different states and territories. So we've all, hand in hand, people with disability or not, have been given an insight to disability, which is great. So it's more awareness, right? But it's a lot of awareness to the great stuff, to the light, but a lot of awareness to the dark. And where we've heard stories about, oh God, I forget the name off the top of my head, it might be Anne-Marie, that was down in South Australia. So, and that was with a registered provider, you know, so, and where she had, you know, CP, cerebral palsy, and where they just weren't carrying out the right services for her, where they had her locked in as a client, but they just left her sitting rotten in a chair, like defecating, maggots, pressure wounds, you know, where these wounds, where led to her death. Like, that's just, like, this stuff shouldn't be happening. And then you got the whole arrangement of where you've got unregistered providers. Like, they can all be bad too. Like, I just tapped into, that was like a registered provider that had gone through all the different, like, modules that they got to go through, and hoops and hurdles to become a registered provider. And it's not easy, because I understand what you got to do there. And registered providers are, like, looked at as a tip of the spear, because that's, you got to go through all those professional registration groups, and where you become a part of that, you don't want to say fraternity, as a registered service provider, and where you've got to be accountable for that, and with what you do as a professional organisation. And the same goes as unregistered providers, but the difference there is that anybody can just go and get an ABN, and it's not, in my eyes and my experience, you can get away with a lot more not being registered, and where you can just drop an ABN and start up somewhere else. And I've just seen too many people get taken advantage of, especially people with intellectual, cognitive, psychosocial disabilities. Oh yeah, I'll sign this, no worries. Yeah. And then you've got a 200,000 plan that gets consumed in 3 months, and that happens in the registered service provision too. Like, now the NDIS has got a fraud squad and team up with the AFP, the Australian Federal Police, and where they see all these people getting taken advantage of, so then they jump in, and people have gone to jail for it. So going back to that, that's where what your question. So you've got the NDIS, and where I think that's shone a lot of light on Disability Australia, positive, negatives in between, and because you got to hear it all. But where I think in general in media, where a lot of people cling to the negative, so where that has led into the Royal Commission, because you hear all the crap that goes on.
It's horrible.
Yeah, whether that's people dealing with service providers, whether that's people dealing with clinicians, because you've got a lot of unsavoury clinicians out there that take advantage of people with disability just because they're looking at the dollars and cents and want to gatekeep that situation, and just that could be a whole podcast within itself, right? Because I've seen it, people that are got these prestigious qualifications and taking advantage of individuals, and then you've got, people going into that have to deal with Centrelink, or have to deal with the agency, and how that can work better. So it's showing the negative on the scheme itself, because you've got individuals that don't necessarily understand that work behind the desk, and that are signing off on these plans that dictate these individuals' lives and the services that are within that. And these people just don't get disability, but some of these individuals at times have got KPIs to meet, so it doesn't look good for them if they're just signing off massive amounts of money with every individual that they're putting plans together for. And, they've air quotes here, like, where it's supposed to be uncapped, the scheme, but sometimes that just doesn't transfer. And, the thing is, we've got clients ourselves, like here with CultureConnex, and I scratch my head, because sometimes we've got, say, clients where they've got, say, a rare disability, and so their siblings, they're a year apart, but their plans, look, they need the same things, but their plans can be totally different. And I'm like, no, that should be exactly the same, because despite they're only a year apart, they're going through the exact same struggles, so it should be a mirror image, yeah? So you got a lot of this that's happening from, people dealing with services, dealing with whether that's, direct service provision, whether it's got to do with advocacy, whether it's got to do with all different facets of life of that person with disability. And so you got all the negativity around it, and how systems can be better. So that's what's led to the Royal Commission. So where people are screaming at the rooftops. So that's led to a collective of appointed professionals, being the commissioners, and then they've been able to grab different advisory group panels, and where I was a part of one of them, and where they've travelled the nation and collated all these different horrific stories. And now the public can see that, and hopefully that adds weight to the government that we've got in place now to take action. How can we make this work better holistically? How can we talk to our partners in the community? Because it's all about the people who've lived experience here, right? Rural, urban, remote, it's got to do with the end user. If it's got to do with the wheelchair, the end user of the service provision of the people that are coming in their home and get them up every day. To do with the OT, to do with the hospital. I've gone through, like, I'm a fair-skinned black fella, and when they've found out that I'm Koori, Aboriginal, and when I've been in a hospital system, because this is just, I'm jumping around here, but where I was in hospital, this is me being as a quad, and I was fully aware, could hear everything that was going on, and when they found that I was Aboriginal, just how things had turned, and the attitude, like the doctors and the nurses, and I'm seeing more people come in, and this was up in the Hunter Valley, so we're going more rural. The attitude of how services were interacting with me, because me being Aboriginal, because the thing was, right, and they thought, because how my body had shut down due to the heat, and they just were looking at me being a drunk black fella, 100%,
I can't, if I swear one more time on this podcast, I don't think I'm going to have this podcast anymore.
No, Saka, she's right. She's doing solid work here. Swear as much as you want. People have got to hear it.
This is, again, like, you saw it in real time. Like, you saw the change in real time from you, like, people assuming you were just, like, white, to then discovering not really, and then, like, being like, oh, we've gone from this, it must be this, to, oh, it's definitely this other thing, which we didn't even factor in the first place, and would never have been something that we would have considered had it not been for the fact that, people assume immediate. I don't get it.
Being in that hospital, and once I was able to talk and I'm pointing out, you done this, you done that, you done that, all of a sudden I get put up to a room, by myself, got aircon, got this, we'll look after him, so we won't speak up. I just wanted to get out of there. I wish I blew it up a bit more, but I just wanted out of that place.
I guess this comes back to when people with disabilities, it's already exhausting when you have to do something that, like, your health was at risk, and I assume, and
it was, because they were leaving me sitting there, and I saw more people coming in, and they were serving, they were looking after these guys, and I'm not saying, oh, poor me, come and look after me and do X, Y, and Z, but I knew my body was doing this, and I know how hospital systems work and certain things that in protocol, and when it's got to do with nursing and whatever else, and I'm like, this ain't right, so
it's physically exhausting having to constantly monitor your own health, and you are the best person to be like, no, something's definitely wrong right now, internally, externally, whatever, and then to go through what you went through, and then to be like, and I'm going to fight it. It's physically exhausting, and I think for a lot of people it's too much, so then things get left by the wayside. And again, this is just my assumption here, and you can feel free to say yes or no, but, like, when it's already physically exhausting, when you've already got to deal with so much, when depending on your disability, you might entirely rely on carers, and so there's so much vulnerability there for a lot of people, that when it gets to the stage where they're like, something is not right and unfair and being unjust to me, but I'm so exhausted, and so then a lot of people, a lot of things just get left by the wayside. So, you know, when we're talking about the Disability Royal Commission, we're talking about it, you know, so they were dealing with the abuse, neglect, that sort of thing. A part of me, just observation-wise, I can see how it got to this stage purely because it just gets really exhausting. There are certain personalities and certain types of people that would be like, I'm going to take this to the very end. I'm going to fight it to the very end. But there are so many other people that just physically, intellectually, emotionally can't. You must have come across a lot of those sorts of stories. They're coming out in the Royal Commission, but God, what emotionally taxing that must have been for people to even be able to share.
And, you know, because then I know people that were going to step up to the plate and tell their story, but it was just too much, or fear of the unknown, like they're scared of, you know, is there going to be retribution if I put my story out there? And it is emotionally and physically taxing. You know, people having to explain themselves over and over again. But it is good when people do step up, and it's great that we've got, you know, social media can be a hindrance, but it's good that people can be their own platform and broadcast to the treetops and their story, or even through mediums like this with podcasts too, you know. So, and just what blows me away too, it's just that unconscious bias. So where I've seen it with, even with some of our own clients, right, because like with our service provision, because we look after, like with our main workforce is support workers, so we hire a lot of support workers here and send them out to help individuals out in community, and where we look after people with high complex disabilities, quadriplegia and, you know, TBIs, traumatic brain injuries and all sorts of stuff, CP, muscular dystrophy. But just what I've seen too, which drives me nuts, because when we've had to deal with guardianships at times, and what guardianships will slap on a black fella, but when we've seen a very similar circumstance with someone that's not Aboriginal, and where the state body does not take action, and seeing all this in real time. So that's seeing that from, you know, like where I've seen a lot in advocacy, but where I'm seeing this as, now, you know, as a service provider, and seeing that in real time, and it's just not fair. And even where there's been situations where, you know, when it's got to do with a meeting, say, and I'm talking on the phone to whether it's other state bodies, representatives or other service providers, I don't tell them I'm in a chair, but when I wheel into the room, just how it changes the attitudes. Not always, but, you know, you can see just look on their face sometimes, or, you know, you're with them, you're a part of their team.
There were 222 recommendations coming out of the Disability Royal Commission. What really stood out to you?
Like when it's got to do with education, you know, that's a huge one. Not just kids, but when you're looking at, you know, adults as well, when it's got to do with tertiary or other types of education, what they're missing out on. You know, another big one is like ADEs, Australian Disability Enterprises, where, you know, a lot of that can be almost like modern day slavery, because we're looking at individuals that, like, just to paint a scenario, right, you've got these Australian Disability Enterprises where it might be a factory and they've got a contract to pack products in a box. These individuals with disability are working in these environments 6 hours a day. So they're doing 6 hours a day, and so that company will get paid for that contract for those boxes to be packed, and they make money out of those individuals with disability, their plants, right? So where it's like they're doubling up. How much do you reckon they get, some of these individuals, per, say if they're doing 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, how much do you reckon they get per week?
I have heard $2 an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, you know, that, or it could be $80, or, you know, a week.
Okay, so just for some context, we don't have a system like the United States where our minimum wage is like single dollars generally here. So it'd be like if you're what is it, 15 and over or something, it's like $17 an hour or something like that. So then if you think about the context of then one of these exploitative companies paying a 40-something-year-old $2 an hour, a 30-something, anybody $2 an hour, unfathomable, right?
Yeah, because then you got that individual, like, and then they come home and they're looking at brother or sister and they're like, how come they work similar hours but they can live out of home, rent a place, they can buy all this cool stuff? Why not me? So off the back of that, I hope that, because some of these people that are working at these ADEs, they're on a disability support pension or some other type of income from the government. So hopefully that changes where they are getting paid to do the work they're doing, because these companies, organisations are getting paid contracts for certain jobs, so it's almost like double dipping in a sense, because then they're getting paid out of that person's NDIS plan. You know, so off each individual, they might have a warehouse, 200 individuals, and they're getting between 10 to 20k per individual in that ADE, you know. So that's a lot of money that they're bringing in. And it's hard too, because some of these people have been in these ADEs for 20 years and it's more than that, you know, it's friendships and other things like that.
There's a safety net.
That too, you know, and it's been productive. But you got to, yes, being productive, but you got to be bloody fair, right? And there's all other situations that come from the Royal Commission, and when it's got to be like clamping down on service, like the NDIS and the service provision underneath that, and when it's got to do with the regulation of it. And so people can't just go and, you know, look after an individual and where they don't come underneath, or will, air quotes, like underneath the Quality and Safeguards Commission, but it's easier for someone that's not registered to just drop off, pick up an ABN somewhere else and just jump in the game again and take advantage of the individuals. And then you've got, and I have struggles with it, it's with the gig economy when it's got to do with, and it does help some individuals, like when it's got to do with certain, without sort of naming names, like when you've got these massive digital platforms that have their support workers on there, and where I think the regulation with those systems can be tightened up a bit, because there's no real management, there's no line direction. So if you've got this person that goes on an app and they're looking at all these different support workers with profiles and click on, oh yeah, they look okay, they'll work out for me, and like then that person's got higher care needs and this individual isn't necessarily trained.
They're not ready
at all. And you know, really where that registered nurse or other component should be involved, or some sort of management system, and think something goes wrong, and if something does go wrong, you've got that individual that should be able to, whether it is the support worker or if they're unsure of the situation, or if it is the participant, the client, they should be able to talk to management of what the process should be, because I know it's sort of that peer-to-peer system, and hey, it does work for plenty of people out there, but there needs to be more regulation around that system.
Hey, I've speaking of that, if I'm somebody living in a remote community, rural community, regional community, and I wanted to access a care worker, or there was not enough care workers in my area or something like that, talk to me about the actual struggle it is to try and get proper support workers and proper people to actually be not only culturally aware, also aware of somebody's disability. That can't be easy to find, right?
No, and that's in whatever system, whether it is a gig economy and just, you know, because it's hard, you know, bringing an Uber system to disability support work, but anyway, and then looking at like general, registered service provision, or if what does work, can work a lot of the time in those areas is when it's got to do with unregistered service provision. Now, that's where I'm saying where it does work, because, how are you going to get one individual, like, to go out and go through this whole registration process that costs thousands? It's a lot of money to be a registered service provider, right? And not everybody has access to that, so then you've got to find ways around it. And where it is individuals or it is community sort of add and weight to, if they don't have jobs, and you've got people that are in need, it's trying to look at that within your community, that person with a disability or that person that does need a job, and you've got trust factor, cultural factors there of the intersectionality that works on certain levels. So take advantage of your community if everybody's on the same wavelength, because people can get still taken advantage of, whether it's remote or if it is urban. So people are people, right? And it makes it trickier when things are at a distance. So, and when people don't have resources and you just got to work with what you got. So how do we make that work? Well, we need the powers that be to, if it is giving more jobs to individuals working for the NDIA, working for the Quality and Safeguards, getting out to these areas, getting at the coalface and seeing how it works, talk to the people. And it's good that you do have advocacy units like FPDN and others that I've been involved in, and I still jump in the advocacy side of things, even though, like, what I do with work these days, I'm more focused, just because it takes my time up mainly with service provision, because running all these crews are individuals, whether it's got to do with support work and new builds of specialist disability accommodation, all sorts of stuff. So, but with advocates here first and foremost, then comes service provision. So where I can lend my hat to that side, and then that's why, because of why we started a foundation here at CultureConnex. So we started a foundation here so we can spearhead more advocacy, and where I want to build teams with that, have First Nations focus, because we've got Kooris and mobs working for us here, and where I want to spearhead that service provision and do that right, but advocacy also, and do that right off the back of the Royal Commission, and having that working hand in hand. But it makes me see what works within my own structures. But I'm also talking to lots of other individuals out there that are, not a part of my, CultureConnex banner, like with our organisation, but because I want to know how things work. I want to make them improve, whether it's under my own banner or other banners. I just want to see the general population across the nation be on a wavelength and playing field like everybody else. Everybody needs care and support.
In the beginning of this podcast, you had mentioned the man in the Northern Territory with a bag over his head, and you were saying that is not localised to the Northern Territory. Now, your work has been with the incarceration, like the jail system and stuff, and do you want to talk a little bit about some of the work that you had done in there and some of the observations you've made?
Oh, yeah, that's a tricky one. And when you're dealing with adults in incarceration facilities, but with kids, and that was, and still is, because we're still dealing with kids that are, whether under the state, we're trying to avoid stolen generation 2.0 here. And, this is where a lot of my advocacy spearheads in the back of the service provision, right? So it's nuts, like, and we're going back to what you see up in the NT, and like this is happening all over, where you've got certain incarceration units for juveniles in Sydney where they've had the same setups, and then you're getting kids with disability, and that's the thing, that you've got this unconscious bias where people don't give a shit, where they don't have the education on that person with disability or the cultural factors of Aboriginality. And where they'll just lock them up, keep them in solitary confinement. You've got some kid in solitary confinement that does not understand. They've got psychosocial disabilities anyway, and then you're putting more pressure on that, and then you're wondering why that they've, because in those solitary confinement units, some of them have got like built-in systems, whether that's a toilet and a water fountain and stuff like that, and some kids have jumped all over it, and you can understand why. And then what happens, and they go to court, and then they get further charges for, jumping all that, like full destruction, like smashing all that gear, and it's just a cycle. It's just recidivism. It's like, how do you break that? And there's so many ways that you can, and where you start with education, and whether it's getting advocates going in the prison systems, talking to the people that work in it, the kids themselves, and when it's got to do with the cultural factors, the intersectionality of disability. But it's crazy, man, like I've seen where they just don't have the education, and they'll just lock them up left, right and centre. And you'll see a kid, because they'll be playing up on the streets, and they've got an intellectual cognitive disability. They might have FASD, and whether that's fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and they don't know they're doing the wrong thing, and they get picked up, and they still don't know that they're doing the wrong thing when they're in these units, and the cycle goes on. And where I know people that are locked up now, but I've known them since they were kids, and where they've gone through the cycle, and now they're still going through that as an adult. And we've been fortunate enough where, like, we've been able to break some of those situations and getting them out, getting people jobs, and getting them housing and stuff like that. But it's hard, and where we've got some of the people that we know that have been locked up since they were 16, mid-30s now, and now you've got the institutionalised factor. So you might take them out to community support, but then bring them back home, and then they don't leave their room because they're used to living in a 4x4 cell. So then you're trying to bring in other stakeholders, clinicians, trying to tap into that to try and subside that mental note of, what should I do in life? Do I belong here? Like, I'm just systematically used to living in a situation like that, and how do you break that? And there's so much that goes on there too, and it's hard with a lot of the kids too, where you've got a lot of people that work in these spaces that are good, a lot of good people that run these prison systems that do a lot of good, but then you've got people that do a lot of harm, and where you got people that purposely work in these environments to take advantage of these kids, without me going too dark. When I've got to do with the physical stuff, the sexual stuff, sexual abuse, like I've seen kids get taken advantage of sometimes because they'll have an intellectual disability, and they'll be like, oh, they won't talk, they won't believe them, and you're talking about people working in the prisons, or the foster parents out in, there's a lot, there is a lot of good people, and that work in these refuges, and like foster parents or work in these prison systems, incarceration units, but there's a lot of dark stuff where these people will purposely become these roles to take advantage of kids. And I've seen rap sheets I've seen kids and looking at what they've gone through, and I'm like, how does this happen so often? And these are some of the stories that have come through the Royal Commission, and where we need to squeeze these people out of the system. But it's just going to be continuous. You need people like yourself, like plenty of others out in the community that need to fight the good fight to keep squeezing these people out of the system, because there's too many people that get taken advantage of, whether that's just general people in the community or without work in a professional capacity. So, but sorry for being a bit
Oh no, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
We're just talking about it. We didn't even live it. You're probably hitting the tip of the iceberg of everything you've actually had to hear about and witness, which then I guess leads me to when you're talking to the UN and you're observing how other countries are perceiving Australia. How was that for you, and how was their perceptions of Australia?
Yeah, that was interesting, hey, because then you had all different individuals from different nations, whether that was from Uganda or European nations or, African or different continents, Asia. Like, this is a while ago, but, pretty much a bit of a joke, because you got some, you got third world countries. So, like, you tell them, but then you hear their stories, and that's, next level. And that's the thing, you go, and talking about third world countries, people, like, you got to travel a nation here, because you're seeing some of the spots in Australia where it seems like a bloody third world country, and what goes on, and with the support, the lack of it, on all fronts. So, yeah, it was interesting seeing, like, talking to individuals from overseas and getting their perspective. But going back to what we have here, like, we're very fortunate, and you look at, like, a powerhouse like the United States, and they got nothing when it comes to disability support, because I talk to Americans over here and they get blown away when they see the support that we've got, and we're very lucky because a lot's privatised over there. So our government does get on the front foot with a lot of schemes and does help our individuals as a whole and the community. And sometimes I feel bad talking about this stuff because I look at other countries, but
I feel this. I feel the same way. But like, a part of you is like, it doesn't mean it's not it's not unacceptable.
And we've got to focus on our own backyard here and try and, like, really help develop that and push that, and we can and we will, and just getting the right people in. But even going to the no vote, like with the referendum, like,
talk about that.
Like the overseas journalism that was going on there, they were just like, this is an absolute joke. How come they can't recognise the people that have walked here for 65,000 years plus? Why couldn't that just be that should be just a breeze? But then that's another thing to do with education, right? So, and where people don't know, and misinformation, that drove me nuts. Around here, I was seeing pamphlets that were given out at local cafes that were just...
If you don't know, vote no.
There was that stuff, but when it had to do with land tax, it had to do with stuff that was completely not true. But that's another podcast within itself. But you see a lot of it with the NDIS, a lot of misinformation. Like, people will just throw stuff out there, and that's where social media can be very vile. Something can get put out there and it just it gets legs and just runs off and snowballs, and it's bigger than Ben-Hur, and you've got a whole community thinking, oh, this is what the NDIS can do, and I'm like, no, it can't, or no, the NDIS can't do this, and it's like, no, yes, it can. So it's just people you got these mini computers in your hand. Google, just really do your thorough research when it's got to do with any information out there. Just jump in, have a crack. Just don't fall on the ears or looking at social media and just thinking that's right. Just do your own research. Question everything.
Because also, social media is tailored around what you like and what you're interested in, because they've got that AI component. So yeah, it's not that hard to see how it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you are, that if you look at enough things that are the same thing, it becomes your entire feed.
Those messages, it's like you're almost subconsciously, you're cruising about life and you're looking at your phone or you're hearing this stuff, podcast, radio, or whatever medium that you look into, and whether you're looking for the answers or not, like, that can just seep into your mind. And like you said, if that's hitting the mark 7 times and it just sucks when it's the wrong thing and you're not doing your own education. And that's what drives me nuts, because going back to like these people have got mini computers and, you know, you don't have to have a laptop or PC, but just jump in, Google and look around. For the most part, you're going to find realistic answers that hold truth. Not all the truth, but because you got to look at multiple systems, whether that's got to do with Google, YouTube, whatever, but just jump in.
So let's talk about CultureConnex. How did you establish this organisation, and like what was the gap that you thought, okay, I need to be able to fill that gap?
Yeah, so that was being an advocate, right, and travelling the nation and seeing what I see from different communities, urban, rural and remote. And then receiving my own package, and I'm like someone that can look at that document, look at what, and talk along the same language of what's reasonable and necessary, because the NDIS does have its own language and you got to understand that, and that's not easy. But just seeing that and seeing what I had to fight for within my own package, and they weren't massive things, and just seeing the different gaps within the NDIS and talking to, well, when the Quality and Safeguards Commission come in, I'm like, man, I'm a C5, C6 quad, sitting in my wheelchair here, wheeling around, going about life and just taking in the knowledge of what the scheme is, what it is, what it's supposed to be for me, what is it supposed to be for other individuals out in the community, but also the ripple effect as well. And I always talk about that of, yeah, I've got my disability, but how does it affect my wife, my family environment, my community, general day, everyday life? How does it affect others, and what do we need to put in place for that? Whether that's got to do with the physical stuff, the mental stuff, like there's a lot to take in, you know, whether you've been born with a disability or not, you know. Life's a roller coaster, whether you're in a chair or not. So just seeing all the different facets of the NDIS and sort of, and working with FPDN, and I just gravitated towards wanting to bring tangible outcomes for individuals. Advocacy is super important, always a place for it, always will be. But how I felt and how I do feel today is, and like I said, iron sharpens iron, and I'm still doing advocacy, but I can see how I can be a better service provider. And I think lived experience is a huge factor. So, because, you know, where we hire other people with lived experience, and which is huge, and that's whether we've got our support coordinators doing, you know, level 2 coordination, doing level 3 complex stuff, when you're dealing with psychosocial disabilities or people coming out of incarceration units, or, you know, if we're dealing with, you know, youngsters that you know, just start high school or starting public school, or ASD level 2, or autism level 2, autism level 3. So we look after people with all different types of disabilities, but that's where I could just see where I wanted to bolster that up, and just where I can try and service as many people as I can, making sure that we're doing it pretty solid operational level, because we look after people with high complex disabilities, and where we'll have teams where I have to, or we have to employ, you know, I've got a team of 12 around one individual. So whether that's 24 hours support, whether we're doing community support and set, you know, it might be 4 hours, 6 hours a day, getting individuals out to, if they want education of sorts, or if whether they're going to school, or where they want to go to another educational environment, whether that's where they just want to learn how to live. How do I live as this person with disability, and just how do I operate, you know, whether that's got to do on a functional level physically, on a functional level cognitively, psychosocial. There's so many facets to it. And going back to, yeah, our main workforce is support workers, getting them out to the community, and that's in different states and territories, and just really pushing that. my background being a carpenter builder, and I'm a stickler for anything under AS 1428, which is the Australian standards of how to build accessible dwellings. But we'll push the barrier of that because a lot of it's mapped on people in manual chairs. So I'll open that up. So I get involved in that on a design level, on a build level. So so if anybody wants to get involved in that, holler at me. You can get us through all different mediums and we'll get through to that. But it's important that it all starts with the roof over your head, but where we can provide the supports too with individual supports, whether that's bringing in the people to get you up, shower, personal care, or getting you out of the community. We're also registered, for occupational therapy, psychology, speech, so we want to bolster that up too. Start getting more
multidisciplinary.
Yeah, 100%. And where we balance that out as best as we can. So there's a lot that we're involved in, and it makes me proud when we do get individuals when we do get the right supports in, when the people are happy, when the clients are happy, their families are happy, the stakeholders are happy. That's super important. Sometimes we're dealing with individuals that don't have coordinators, but we're just going in and helping these individuals anyway, and we're making that person, that LAC, that local area coordinator, which is like the middleman between the NDIS and the participant, or we're talking to the NDIS and where we want to build their education. It's like, there's this person and this is what they need, but this disability in general, X, Y, and Z, this is what they should need, and you should bolster this up. It's not just saying, these clients need more money for the sake of it, because we work with some clients where it blows my mind where they've got, just say, 80,000 in their plan, but they don't necessarily they don't need it, so it just sits there. But then I see other clients that really do need it and they don't get granted those dollars and cents, and it always depends on who's sitting behind that desk and who approves it. It is getting better, education, right? So, but it is good. The main thing is when we do get wins for individuals where they've been screaming at the treetops for certain things for years, and then we do, because we go in and we've got a love-hate relationship with the NDIS. Because because we'll substantiate what is needed for that individual, and that's it. If they need it, they need it. So, and then we'll come in and support these individuals as best as we can with our support workers, with our support coordinators, whether it's registered nursing, with the wound care, with seizure management, you name it.
What is your proudest accomplishment or accomplishments at CultureConnex so far?
Just being able to work alongside my wife. So just the support that she has been, we've been together for a long time since we were kids, and now that we're working together, and just seeing her passion and me seeing her develop as a person, and it's funny, us having the relationship that we do as work colleagues, and how we try and iron sharpens iron there. And we've got our different strengths, and I'm very fortunate to have someone like her in my life as a wife, but also as a colleague. And what we just try and want to do in this environment, and how we want to persevere. And mate, she's a bloody strong advocate too. What I've seen her do, whether that's education and talking to the government, whether that's state or federal bodies, whether it's talking to clients, whether it's talking to families, and when it's got to do with the education of what's right for that individual and how you can live life with your disability and aim for the bloody stars, because everybody deserves a go. Whether it doesn't matter what disability you got, doesn't matter if you come out of an incarceration facility, doesn't matter whatever that facet of life is, we're going to try and help push that. And it's awesome when I do see the best out of her. And yes, it's not easy, and it can be stressful, and we put a lot of hours into it, but that's the proudest moment, is just seeing her develop and just seeing her work ethic and just seeing my wife as a person, you know. Yeah, I still pinch myself about this stuff, you know. I'm very fortunate to be in the position that I am. Like, yeah, I'm a high-level quad and I've got limitations, but it shouldn't stop you. So, you know, it's easy enough said than done. Yeah, you just got to keep the wheels moving forward. Whatever background, whatever facet of life that you come from, whether it's disability or not, you know, you just got to keep the legs of the wheels moving forward. And, you know, life's not easy at all. You know, I'm someone that still has their dark days, you know. Everybody's got vulnerabilities, no one's perfect, you know, but you got to let those pieces shatter, and if you can, put them back together and soldier on and try and, you know, if you can make your life better, that's a bonus. But even a further push beyond that, if you can, you know, engage and help other people off the back of what you're doing, and you can see positivity within yourself. But if you can branch out and help others, you know, whether you're working in and around, and I'm just coming from this from disability, because it's important to me, you know, if you can help others, and whether that's, you know, you don't necessarily have to do it from a working capacity, but if you can do it in any other capacity of just helping your other brothers and sisters out there, you know, disability or not, just pick each other up and just keep persevering, because like I said, life ain't easy, and we keep needing to, you know, get up each day. If you're still breathing, have a crack, have a go.
This episode has been hosted, produced and edited by me, Susan Wood. You can check the show notes in the podcast episode for everything we've talked about. Look after yourselves, and thanks very much for listening.